3, 2, 1, action!
Hi everyone, this is Victoria Walters from My Kids Locker, and I am going to share with you another empathy tale today. This one was told on June 10th, 2018 to my children. These empathy tales are meant for creating compassion one story at a time. And this one today is The Boy, the Princess, and the Reflections. The reason why I created this story was mostly because of some of the students I work with and that I've worked with over the last 19 years of my teaching career, and that I find that some students that I've worked with have a lot of shame that is built around their disability. Sometimes a disability can be your greatest weakness, but also your greatest strength. I think that sometimes when you are dealing with a physical disability, sometimes you feel like you are completely different from other people and you may not be accepted. I know for me personally, I know that seeing my students struggling with physical disabilities makes me want to encourage them to overcome with grit any prejudices that they might face in their life. And I know for me personally, my daughter was recently diagnosed with dyslexia, mild form of dyslexia. And it's been a very challenging journey getting that diagnosis. And I think sometimes when you are dealing with a disability, that sometimes invisible disability, sometimes looking at a reflection helps you. And sorry, I'm getting emotional here. But I think this story represents the boy, the princess, and the reflections. It represents two individuals who look into their reflections to talk to each other for years, and they fall in love, and they only look at the reflections and talk through their reflections through water because they're ashamed of who they are as people. And I hope that through your life that perhaps you've either encountered either a disability yourself or possibly a family member, or maybe if you're a teacher, a student. And I think that this story resonates with me so much because sometimes there can be so much pain with looking people in the eyes and showing them your true self. And I just think that this is just such a beautiful testimony to being authentic and showing empathy for other people. And sometimes, in the princess's perspective, she was ashamed of who she was and what her role was. And with the boy, well, his disability was a physical disability. So as you listen to the story, I hope that it tugs on your heartstrings like it did for me. And whether you are personally dealing with a disability or whether you know someone who is, I want you to remember to always overcome that by looking at it as your superhero power. And as a friend recently told me, it's like your story for origin, and how that is such a powerful thing, because superheroes always have a story of origin. Well, with that being said, I hope you enjoy The Boy, the Princess, and the Reflections. And my question to you as you read the story is, how can you accept your own disabilities and how can you overcome them? And I hope that this story allows you to feel the importance of our differences and how they are very special. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the story. And with that, here is The Boy, the Princess, and the Reflections. The Boy, the Princess, and the Reflections. Story told on June 10th, 2018. Life is truly a reflection of what we allow ourselves to see and be. Trudy Simonakis Veskovsky. Once upon a time, there lived a boy in the Oak and Eagle Kingdom. His name was Nathaniel. When he was born, his skin was different. His patchy skin looked like hard, cracked paper. Often when he walked through the village, people would make fun of the way he looked because they did not understand him. He felt alone and he began to not go through the village anymore, but go the long way around the village. One thing he loved to do is to go on a boat and travel on the local streams. He would look high up on the hills and see a beautiful castle far up on the hillside. In the castle there was a princess, and the princess was the same age as him. Every time he went on his little boat, he would bring a paddle to steer the boat. His grandmother gave him the paddle, and it was a special paddle. The paddle was magical, and he would treasure it. He would press the paddle into the water when the sun was high in the sky and the water was shimmering. He would think to himself, "My grandmother is a kind woman. Her care allows me to paddle through the magical land." His grandmother had given him such a wonderful gift. One day, when he was paddling, he saw a small dock. On the dock was a young girl who would be lying on the dock with her long, beautiful blonde hair hanging. The tips of her hair would touch the water. She would love to look at the ripples on the water, and he would also love to do that as well. He would love to look into the ripples because his skin was rough, and when he looked at his reflection, he wouldn't see his skin problems, but he would see a wonderful reflection filled with reflected sunlight and gentle waves from the ripples of the water. One day, he decided to paddle up to her. He would look down at the water like she was doing, and they did not make eye contact until they came close together. He saw her eyes in the reflection of the water, and he connected with her there. She wouldn't lift her head, and he wouldn't lift his head. She did not want him to know that she was a princess, and he did not want her to know the scars on his face that were so painful to him. They just stared down at the water and looked at each other through the glistening stream. He saw her face, and she would see his face in the water. "Isn't it amazing that we can be out here on this beautiful summer day?" he said to her. "Oh, yes, I love being outside with the trees waving in the air. The birds are beautiful in the sky. The warmth of the sunlight hitting my hair and back is the most comfortable feeling to me." Her hair swayed back and forth as a gentle breeze came by. As time went by, every single day they would meet. They would talk about their favorite foods, favorite animals, and favorite memories. Every day, though, they would only look at each other through the reflections in the water. They got to know each other. Years went by, and they came to know each other well. She came to love this boy who would never lift his eyes to her. He was kind, compassionate, and empathetic, and caring. His voice soothed her soul and the pains of her life. He loved her, and she loved him. They cared for each other. That made him feel special and important. She showed empathy when he would share stories about the way he looked and acted. She cared. He knew she cared. They started to really care for each other. When they started to talk about each other's birthdays, they realized they had the same birthday, September 1st. So they decided on September 1st, when they both were to turn 25, that they were going to look each other in the face and celebrate who they were, despite where they came from and their faces. On September 1st, he came wearing his best shirt, and he paddled slowly up to the dock, knowing that he may be rejected by the way he looked. She gently walked down to the dock, dropping her hair down where the water was. They both went to raise their faces, and they met each other with pure, caring eyes that were empathetic and kind. He realized that he had been talking to a princess all along. He felt embarrassed. The princess said to him, "I love looking at the reflections because it makes me think that I am just a typical person. I like looking into the reflections because it makes me think that I am a typical person too," he replied. They agreed, despite their past and their conditions, that both of them were special. The princess shared that she was to marry a prince from a distant land. Nathaniel shared how he loved her, and she replied that she loved him too. She said, "You are the one I want to be with forever." He replied, "But I am merely a commoner. My face is scarred with these pains, and I am not worthy of your care. I think you need to meet my father, and I want you to bring your paddle that your grandmother had given you." The day came when he was to meet the king. They walked holding each other's hands into the castle. She realized that he looked different than other people, but that was okay. As they walked into this amazing throne room, he saw her father sitting on the throne. His eyes were down and looking at the manuscript. "Yes, daughter, what would you like? I am busy right now, but it seems that you have found a new servant to help us at our castle." "Father, this is the man I will marry." His head was down and his clothes were not of royal stature. She said, "Take the paddle and show my father your heritage." Nathaniel lifted it above your head so my father can see what an amazing heritage you have. As he lifted his head and the paddle at the same time, a magical transformation came. His clothes transformed into elegant garments, and his face cleansed of his scars. The paddle was a magical paddle. The paddle had changed him to look like his heart looks. He looked majestic, handsome, and royal. The king raised his eyes to see a wonderful transformation. "What just happened?" "I don't know. Your transformation is truly what your heart shows and reveals. My grandmother was magical, and she blessed me with this beautiful paddle," replied the man. The king embraced Nathaniel and said, "Marry my daughter. My eyes see the kind, caring person you are, and we accept you for who you are." Nathaniel lowered the paddle from his head, and his skin became marked and scarred again. Yet the king believed that the paddle allowed him to see his true heart. Nathaniel would never have this transformation again. Yet, in that moment, it happened. The king agreed for Nathaniel and the princess to wed.
3, 2, 1.